Hi, Mark Gilbert here. This video is entitled Using Your Sphere of Influence. I want you to imagine for the next few minutes that you and I and every person that you meet are walking around in a bubble of energy that envelops them and extends beyond them. It extends beyond them to the area to which they have some influence over the world out there. In reality, we do have this energetic bubble. And what it incorporates is the aspects of ourselves where our thoughts, our words, and our actions have some degree of control. Where is that? Well, it certainly seems to be in our world of form, in the world of our bodies. We can raise our hands by thinking about, I'm going to raise my hand, or we can look left or right. We can make these choices in every moment. We can make choices as to what words we're going to say, how we're going to show up in the world, how we be a person on this planet. In every moment, we're making choices. And those choices create this sphere of influence around us. Now, yes, you may say, oh, I've got some limiting beliefs or I've got some addictions where I can't control my body, so my body really isn't in my sphere of influence. And if you're in that particular case, I'd invite you to seek some outside help to help you navigate that challenge that you're moving through. But I suspect that whoever you work with is going to start with a recognition that you and I have some degree of control. We have control over ourselves. And to the degree that we feel like we might have some physical addictions, any healing of that addiction is going to begin with taking control of our thoughts and actions. Not seeing ourselves as victims to the world out there, but understanding that we have control over who we are as a person. Now, once we move into that space and we all see that we have this degree of control over our thoughts, our words, and our actions, we're going to begin imagining that we're walking around in the world with this energetic sphere around us. Most of the time, we seem to only have control or influence over our own selves. But there's other times when our influence can extend beyond ourselves and into impacting other people. Think about that if you're a parent and you've got children, that you have some degree of influence over them, although some days it may seem like you don't. But you have a sphere of influence over your children, and you're influencing how they grow up and what they think is right and wrong, and putting some boundaries on their actions and helping them to navigate the world as a human being so that they can grow up and be healthy and well adjusted. Think about your relationship with a significant other, that you have some degree of influence over what they do and say and how they show up in the world, just as they have influence with you. And in fact, most healthy relationships have a very good degree of balance of this influence over one another. Imagine that you're working out in the work world and you have some role as a manager or supervisor where you're directing employees in the work environment. Obviously, your influence is going to extend beyond yourself and into the people who work with you in that work environment. We can look at ourselves out in the world of social media and the postings that we make. Those have a degree of influence out in the world. We can think about politicians and people who are in the media, people who are movie stars and entertainers and sports stars. Every individual has some degree of influence that extends beyond themselves and interacts energetically with other people. Now, as we navigate this physical world, this world of form, it may seem that some people have smaller degrees of influence and other people have larger degrees of influence. Hence, the spheres of influence that these people have may seem larger or smaller. But what I would invite you to do is to back up and let's observe this from a higher standpoint, a higher vantage point. I often speak in these videos and in my classes about the fact that we are spiritual beings who are moving through this human experience. And I want you to imagine in this moment that in the human realm, in this physical realm where we all appear separate and apart from one another, that it can seem like some people have larger or smaller spheres of influence. But as we step back and look at that and move up the scale from the world of the relative, the material world, and into the spiritual world, because our ultimate truth and where we're going in our spiritual evolution is a reality of our spiritual truth, that we move up and shift every moment in our perspective of, are we coming from spirit? Are we coming from the mental realm? Are we interacting totally in the physical realm? And so we have this sliding scale of the world of the absolute and the world of the relative in which we live. And that from moment to moment, we change our perspective. much of our time it seems like we're immersed in the world of form because it can be so mesmerizing to us. But if we can shift our perspective and step back from it and see that there's an interplay of all of these bubbles of spheres of influence, then we begin to recognize that all of them have some degree of influence over the whole. In fact, it's like giant bubbles that are bumping into one another and impacting everyone. And so this entire world is a vast oneness of spheres of influence of everyone influencing everyone. So that even if it seems that you and I have a small degree of influence over the world, the fact that we have influence at all is part of this vast oneness. All it takes is one person to change another person's mind, to change another person's mind, to change another person's mind, to have an impact on the planet and where it's going. Yes, it may seem in the world of form that some people, some influencers have more control. You could take, for example, that this particular video compared to maybe somebody who goes on a YouTube channel and talks about their thoughts about their sports team. We may have a fraction of the viewers that that person has for that sports channel. But that doesn't mean that we have less influence. It simply means that the less numbers of people might be watching this, but the people who watch this particular video or anything, even if it's only one person, can impact another person, and that cascades out because the interplay and the interconnectedness of all that is. So don't be discouraged if you seem that your sphere of influence in whatever you're doing has a quote unquote smaller sphere. Because the very nature that you have some control over your own life means that you have some sphere of influence that is impacting others, whether you see it in your day-to-day affairs or not. All of us have a sphere of influence. The question then becomes, how are we using our sphere of influence? What are we doing in our choices, in our thoughts, our words, and our actions to create the planet that we want to live on? When we're immersed in the world of form, in the world of separation, sometimes we can get caught up in bigness and smallness and competition and who's got more power and who's winning and who's losing and all of that. But when we shift our perspective up to the spiritual realm and we start thinking of this from a higher level, we begin seeing that not only that size doesn't matter, as the old joke goes, that the very nature that a few people can impact and shift changes within the world of form, but we also recognize that the interplay of everything is all connected. And then we become aware of the importance of our sphere of influence. And this is the key point I want you to get from this video, is that you matter. You matter in the big scheme of things because every one of us has some aspect of ourselves that is showing up with an influence and impact on the whole. All of us have some influence. And so when we see that everything is interconnected, we know that the slightest things that we do can have an impact. And the question then becomes, with this greater wisdom, from the standpoint of the spiritual, and looking at this spiritual realm to the material, down to the material realm, and with the mental realm in between, that as we move up and down this sliding scale and down back into the world of form, what kind of world do we want to create? What is the world that you want to live in? And if we know that ultimately we're all interconnected and all one, then what are the areas where my sphere of influence can make a beneficial presence on the planet? If we come from fear and doubt and competition, if we worry about winning and losing, if we worry about bettering ourselves at the expense of others, if we seek to do things in a manner that are harmful to others for our own gain or benefit, from the perspective of the spiritual, we begin to realize that that degree of the use of our influence is harmful. It's harmful for the greatest good for the one. So we need to shift what we're doing and start thinking about, how am I showing up in my sphere of influence? As I walk around on the planet every day and my sphere bumps into other spheres, such as through this video, am I being a beneficial presence? If I'm walking down the street walking my dog, am I being a beneficial presence to the person passing by me? I can look away from them and ignore them, or I can say hello. Which is beneficial? Every moment we're faced with that choice where we have an influence over how things interact in this planet, in this world of form. And if we know we're all interconnected and we're here for the greatest good for all, then how can I shift my use of my sphere of influence as I'm navigating this world to be for the greatest good for all? If we can think in that realm, in that perspective from the higher spiritual realm, then we let go of concerns about how many people watch this video, or how many people are liking my Facebook post, or how much influence I seem to have in the world. We forget about the comparing ourselves to others and recognize that all of us have power and control, a degree of influence over this life of ours, and by who we are and how we show up and the actions that we model on the planet, that we are impacting out. Who knows what one encouraging comment can do to one person and change the world? What kind of world do you want to live in? So I invite you this day, and for every day, as you walk around on the world of form, to think about, how are you showing up? Recognize that every one of your interactions, you have a degree or sphere of influence around you impacting others. Are you impacting others for the greatest good? Or are you impacting others in a way that is selfish and self-concerned? I invite you to shift your perspective up the sliding scale into the spiritual realm, and to recognize the unity of all that is. And in so doing, to become a beneficial presence for everyone. Use your sphere of influence through your thoughts, your words, and your actions to do good on the planet. Don't worry about comparing yourself to others. Don't worry about not having a seemingly big impact. The very nature that you're showing up with love and kindness for others is going to have an impact that may expand beyond your imagination.